Tengen, you're a fraud, a liar, a deceiver, and most of all, you're a thumb. So please, hold this L, also this ratio, and I hope you become a massive, gigantic cursed beast with no free will of your own. Thank you to our final patrons, Strawbones, Redwolf4765, and Midnight Gemlord. Now, before we get into this breakdown/review of Chapter 206 of Jujutsu Kaisen, please, if you're leader on this on the chapter, in the comment section down below, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure you hit that little notification bell so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do a Patreon down below. We can support for as low as $1 a month, getting exclusive videos, early content, and more. Also, you can now become a member of the channel to get exclusive content, early videos, and even more exclusive member perks. Now, let's hop into last week's poll. So, last week I ended up asking y'all, with the final and true reveal of all the various abilities of the numerous special grades of Jujutsu Kaisen, I want to know, I need to get your honest opinion. Out of the 3 special grades that aren't Gojo, because Gojo is a little bit too cracked, whose ability would you want the most? Would you want Yuki, Yuta, or Kenjaku's ability? And with an overwhelming, girthy 49% of the vote, Kenjaku took the top spot. Endless curses, endless power, endless options now. And admittedly, I do get that. And I would agree if I got Kenjaku's arsenal right now. Like, if I got it where it is right now after all the curses he's eaten and stuff like that, then that's fine. I'm just not exactly sure if I could really run around wanting to defeat curses and eat them. Like, if I had to start from scratch with Geto, I don't think I would want his technique. I think it would be too much, it'd be too disgusting and too dangerous at first. Because, I can't imagine having to like, you realize, to get these curses, you need to defeat them. Like, you need to bully them down to a point where you can actually, and it tastes like a barf-covered rag. Like, I don't think I really want to eat that. But if I had his current techniques, current arsenal, all he had, yeah. I'll definitely take that. That'd be juicy. However, number 2, I'm not too surprised about this one, even though I think Yuki's technique is definitely a little bit underrated, but obviously Yuta, he's just him. Come on now. Unlimited curse techniques and a super Shikigami, the literal queen of curses that holds all your weapons for you, holds extra cursed energy for you, holds extra for you. Like, legitimately, Rika kind of does it all. And even Yuta in base, despite apparently not having access to his curse technique, is just a monster, and having his amount of cursed energy and his level of reinforcement obviously makes you a beast, a demon, a creature of unknown proportions and abilities, honestly. So I can definitely see why 37% of y'all, my apologies, went with Yuta. And then 14% of y'all, y'all just like me for real. Well, admittedly though, I think I would go with Yuta, personally. Like, if I had to give my own answer, I think Yuta is mine, just because it's that perfect balance. Like, I don't have to eat anything weird, and I also don't have to worry about altering my mass too much. Because the thing with Yuki's, right, is like, you have to constantly add or subtract or manipulate how much mass you have, at least assumedly. And while it is good to just completely ignore concepts, I think I would just get in more trouble than it'd be worth. Like, I would accidentally send Garuda through a wall and just break down an entire building by pure accident. So honestly, I'm leaning towards Yuta, though Yuki, I completely understand the 14% of y'all who went with hers. However, thank you so much for participating in last week's poll. Make sure you get your input in on tomorrow's poll, dropping at 12 p.m. to make sure your input is included for next week's review. Now, let's hop into Chapter 206. What's up, guys? I'm the Pencil here, and here we are to do a breakdown and review of Chapter 206 of Jujutsu Kaisen, which is known as Star and Oil, Part 2. So, Kenjaku. And by Kenjaku, I mean Gege. Stop playing with me. Give me more chapter titles. Stop getting lazy. No, I'm kidding. But let's hop right into the chapter itself. So we open up, and we see that Yuki's kind of questioning Tengen on his proposal. She's like, wait a minute. You are going to dispel Kenjaku's domain. Really? And Tengen goes on to explain, well, yeah, his target is the star corridor within my main. What does Tengen sound like? I almost want to imagine they sound like multiple people at once. Like, they have 3 different voices. Because what? It's 2 actual star plasma vessels have been used. And then Riko Amanai wasn't. And then we have the original Kenjaku themselves. Not Kenjaku. The original Tengen themselves. So maybe, I'm assuming they sound like 3 voices. But I'm not exactly sure. Like, would it be feminine voices? Would it be deeper voices? I don't know. Because supposedly they were be a great grandma. So, which assumes that they typically identify as feminine. But at least no one tends to pick up on that by the way they normally speak. And thusly, it leads me to assume they have a more gender neutral, I don't know. Regardless, His target is the star corridor within my main body. You will confront him in a room of labyrinthine barrier directly overhead. So we see that apparently the main goal is to essentially stall Kenjaku out in a place where Tengen seemingly is supposed to have full control, because they are the best barrier user, and thusly trapping them in the labyrinthine barrier that's going to be directly overhead the Star Corridor room would be the best place to take him on in a battle of domains. And obviously, with what we know about domains, yeah, it's going to be perfect for the usage of canceling Kenjaku's curse technique and giving people like Yuki and Choso an upper hand. And Tengen goes on to explain, each room is an empty barrier. A sorcerer's skills and barriers can alter the structure. A powerful sorcerer like Kenjaku will have command of the setting. And we see that Yuki's like, okay, so Mr. or Mrs. the number one barrier user out there, we're at a disadvantage. And Tengen's like, well, kind of, but not really. In fact, that's what we want him to think, so he'll feel comfortable and stay inside the barrier instead of just running away. But you realize, I am a master of empty barriers. You must get him to open his domain inside one. So essentially what Tengen's goal is just to have everything inside one of the empty barriers, then have Kenjaku make his own barrier inside the empty barriers. And by doing that, Kenjaku would essentially fall under the domain of the original barrier that he's already trapped in. So kind of like, it's weird. Like, instead, imagine if in the fight with Reggie, instead of Megami actually casting his domain on the gymnasium itself, which counted as a quote-unquote barrier, he casted an actual barrier inside the physical barrier. Except the empty barrier that Tengen is referring to is a legitimate Jujutsu barrier rather than a structure. And with that being the case, what Tengen plans to do is use their domain over the empty barrier to completely analyze the vectors and locations and structure of Kenjaku's barrier and pretty much dismantle it from the outside in by going ahead and breaking down all the properties. And Yuki realizes by neutralizing the domain, it makes sense that, oh, well, if you just do that, then his curse technique will be on the frizz and I can use mine if I don't expand my domain, and then we can take him out, hopefully, because he won't have access to curse spirit manipulation, all that. You just need to essentially hit him in the head really hard. Like, as I'm assuming, as long as you crush the original brain, then Kenjaku would end up dying. So it would make sense. And we see that when asked how long this process is going to take, obviously, because Kenjaku's also a master barrier user, Tengen's good and all, obviously number one, but still, Kenjaku's been around for 1,000 years doing his due, so there's gotta be something crazy about it. Tengen's like 10. I just need 10 seconds. And obviously, we're an anime, boys, so you know that 10 seconds is gonna be forever. And we see that Yuki's like, okay, so I just can't use my domain during that time. Instead, I'll just use simple domain, which doesn't burn through curse techniques in a domain class against Kenjaku. But then she gives pause and is like, hold on, wait a second. If I open my domain, Kenjaku will have to open his. Wouldn't that be faster? Even my curse techniques down, I'll still have Choso and Garuda. Interesting how Choso was immediately part of this plan, even though they ended up sacking Choso first. I guess they always assume that Choso will be able to pull through, but it's interesting. And it's cool to see that apparently Garuda, now that I think about it, that's the weird thing about Rika as an extension of Yuta's curse technique. Because for all intents and purposes, the moment he fell out of his domain, shouldn't Rika have just vanished if she's part of his curse technique now? I don't know. But it's interesting to see that while aspects of the curse technique that in regards to oneself, right? Like in terms of Yuki, if she used her domain, even with her curse technique on the fritz, Garuda would still be useful as a Shikigami and seemingly have the same virtual mass or something like that. Like, seemingly enough to beat down Kenjaku, which would likely require some sort of the virtual mass concept breaking stuff. I doubt she means she would literally just, in the little image she draws, would actually just take Garuda as whatever mass it normally has and smack him with it. Garuda would actually keep the properties of increased mass, which is very interesting. It shows that Shikigami kind of don't count as post-domain curse technique wear-offs, which makes me wonder, when Megami masters his technique, I assume it's going to be a barrierless technique, kind of like what we see here and what we see later in the chapter. But with that being the case, even still, I'm assuming his technique still goes a little bit on the fuzz, so it'd be cool for him to start having an inside Shikigami prep, like a pre-domain setup where after his domain runs out, he has his Shikigami ready and waiting in order to attack. Kind of like how, in the way that Hakari used his barrier to move it over the ocean to get an advantage over Kashimo, we could see Megumi doing something to set up his Shikigami outside his own native barrier in order to attack not preemptively, but attack post the barrier coming down. However, we do get to see that even with this hypothetical scenario of the Shikigami retaining the curse technique properties, Tengen explains that, not really. The outer layer of the domain would be your domain, and that would dispel before his, meaning that leaves you essentially defenseless against his domain, because it'll probably take me around 10 seconds to get through your domain, and then I'll have to get through his, and I don't know, 20 seconds within Kenjaku's domain may just be a death sentence. And regardless, worst comes to worst, Kenjaku is extremely knowledgeable, so he could either use Symbol Domain or Hollow Wicker Basket, or a combination of both, which retain curse techniques. Which is very, very true. Kenjaku, with his, like, insane knowledge and moveset, could really just go crazy. Could really just be styling and profiling on everybody there. Because with that kind of ability, he could literally just bait out Yuki to use her domain, stall that out, and then immediately retaliate in such a violent way with any of the techniques he needs to use. And that's not even assuming, like, hypothetically, he may be able to use his curse technique while using Symbol Domain, which would be a crazy wombo combo if you ask me. However, we do get to see that Yuki actually feels low-key insulted by Tengen and Kenjaku in that sense. Like, wow, that only buys you time to get to real domain. Do I really seem that foddered, y'all? And admittedly, like, and this isn't even a knock on Yuki, but I feel like most beings, at least in Kenjaku's eyes, are kind of fodder. Like, to a degree where once you've lived as many lives as he lived, failed as many plans as you have, succeeded in the ways that he has, like, bro, anyone who's not, like, also in his league, in terms of, like, years of experience or just insane and absurd power, like a perfect Gojo clan member, such as Satoru, I feel like, yeah, you kind of are weak. You're kind of just, like, an inconvenience. Kind of like how Choso is viewed as by Kenjaku and stuff like that. You aren't necessarily a threat. You could just hypothetically be a problem. Which is why both of you found each other annoying. But then again, this is before their fight. But it makes sense why both of them just found each other annoying because of the mystery behind each other. But neither of them felt necessarily threatened. However, we do get to see that Tengen is like, being real with you, Kenjaku is one of the few, which is interesting. He said Tengen. They said few. Tengen said few, which implies that there are others. And notably, Kenjaku says barrier usage. Don't assume his Symbol Domain is the same as the others. With that being the case, I wonder what they mean by that. Because barrier usage is one thing, right? But I was gonna say Sukuna, but that's domain specifically. Sukuna doesn't need a domain. He can paint his domain on air. So bro's obviously different to that kind of degree. So it's obviously that Tengen isn't comparing themselves to Sukuna, because Sukuna, I don't think has ever necessarily needed or used a barrier. But if that's the case, who else is Tengen referring to in terms of barrier level? And it's not like Tengen saying there have been a few across history like Kenjaku who can equal me in barrier usage. They aren't saying that. They're saying Kenjaku is one of the few, which implies that they're still alive. Who we talking about? Tengen, who you know? Well, what's you got cooking in that big old bug thumb brain head of yours? Let me know. However, with that being the case, Yuki's like, alright, if that's the case. Their only hope realistically is to get Kenjaku to open his domain and then have Tengen dispel it. And after Kenjaku is burnt out on his curse technique, Yuki absolutely jumps him. However, we do get to see that this is all in the past. This is how it should have worked. This is how it should have gone down. But they made a drastic mistake underestimating a sorcerer of 1,000 years of experience. And we see that domain expansion, blank perfusion, like, why? Gege, why? If this is what it's actually called, Gege, why? Or this is a translator thing, translator, why? But we do get to see that this domain expansion is just like Sukuna. Sukuna demonstrated this domain in Shibuya. It's an amazing feat in which he opens the domain and activates the technique without enclosing the barrier. Thus, there is no outer shell to remove. That is Ironically enough, I don't know why this didn't even cross, like, and notably before this chapter dropped, I didn't see anyone even talking about this being a possibility, like, anywhere. But for some reason, this makes perfect sense. Like, kenjaku has been around for thousands of years. Like, Sukuna mastered this, assumedly, in his original lifetime. Well, he became the king of curses, so we don't know exactly. But he was around the golden age of sorcery. However long the golden age of sorcery was, I'm pretty sure it still is a shorter period than Kenjaku was alive, and Sukuna was able to master that kind of domain. A domain with no barrier. So it makes sense that Kenjaku, a person with over 1,000 years of experience, was also able to master this. Makes you wonder who he practiced on, or if he just practices this at random. But still, that is extremely powerful, but it makes a lot of sense. And we see that Yuki is also permission master of the new shadow style symbol domain. I'm assuming she's the one who taught Todo, so it makes sense. But we see that due to the barrierless nature of a domain, or of this domain, the new shadow style and the symbol domain can't cancel out the technique, because the technique is, it's very interesting how it's described, but in the same way that barriers can't pick up on Toji and Maki because of their, like, lack of curse energy. Due to the nature of these barriers, sort of just attack, or barrierless domains sort of just attacking all things, the new shadow style and the symbol domain and or hollow wicker basket is specifically meant to target the barrier. And thusly, if there's no barrier to target, all it's acting as is a relay of cursed energy externally to defend against the technique. But since the technique is so powerful and there's no direct barrier to cancel it out, the direct hit is just going to slowly eat away at the new shadow style symbol domain as if it were its own barrier, or as if it were its own target, and slowly eat away at it until the user gets hit, which is crazy. Another insane counter to symbol domains. Like, some characters, they just kind of getting, some of their main tech is just getting mopped up. However, we do get to see that Yuki notices that obviously her symbol domain is not holding strong. In fact, it's doing quite the opposite and breaking away. And Kenjaku is looking on as he's holding his domain up and is like, really? Did you really think that technique can withstand my domain? Like, you do realize who you're talking to, right? Like, what was going on here. And we see, and another thing, I don't know, for some reason, this is another thing I love seeing in fiction, and somewhat in general, characters that have the right to be confident enough to be insulted by a lower level attacker technique being legitimately insulted. Like Kenjaku's pulling up here, about to revolutionize the entire world, the entire planet, really, not just the Jujutsu world, and is like, really? This is one of your final defenses against me? A simple domain? New shadow style? You know how fodder that is? Get your hollow wicker basket up. Level your game up. You're really gonna insult me like this? I don't know. I just find it funny. And we do get to see that Yuki's like, well, obviously can't just stand here. My domain is slowly going away, so hurry up, Tengen. And we see, bit by bit, slowly but surely, Tengen actually does start to and start gobbling up Kenjaku's domain. And we see that Kenjaku literally, like, looks at this creature that has evolved past humanity and is like, I see. An old maneuver from a shut-in. Like, bro. I mean, technically that's right. Like, Tengen does not get out much. Do you see their physique? But with that being the case, it's hilarious to see Kenjaku just be like, see, this is why you gotta get out. If there's any reason why you feel like you should leave your house, it's because Kenjaku will laugh at you as he takes over your body. But regardless, we see that the way that Tengen is doing it is by essentially using the edge of the guaranteed hit as the outer shell and erasing it alongside the empty barrier. So, like, you know how Sukuna's domain has that 200-meter range? Essentially, that's a false barrier. There's just no, like, space alteration there. There's no usage or curtain that's up or barrier that's being used. However, what Tengen's kind of doing is sort of enclosing a barrier around that sure hit. So, like, 200 meters and 0.1 nanometers, and sort of overlaying a domain on that, or a barrier on that, and then immediately erasing that barrier. And by doing that, they're kind of eating away at the effects of the sure hit technique. But the reason this is so slow is because you kind of have to keep erasing at an unknown pace. Like, assumingly Kenjaku could just either A, re-expand there, or B, even worse, kind of just peek and pull away at the barrier's size and guaranteed hit range. So like, if Tengen erased the effects in a 200 meter radius, then Kenjaku still has the 199 meter radius, then 198 meter radius, then 197 meter radius, and so on and so forth, which is why it's so slow, and it's an old maneuver, and it's kind of inefficient. And we see that Tengen, once again, gets ever insulted, because Kenjaku's like, yeah, Tengen, let me level with you real quick, bro. You and me are not the same. You see, because I have a life. I have lived. And due to that, he has a lot more experience, a lot more knowledge. Well, Tengen's kind of just been holed up doing its thing for a while now. And we see Yuki's symbol domain falls apart, finally, to the point where the entire symbol domain is stripped away. And we see that Kenjaku, he's just living it up. 1,000 years of conflicts and alliances, a cursed world. And once again, using assumingly the gravity technique, because this doesn't seem to be cursed spirit manipulation, it does seem to be gravity, Yuki is slammed into the ground once the sure hit effect finally takes place on her, and Kenjaku needs to shield himself from the debris that erupts. And in order to just absolutely end the domain right there to prevent Yuki's death, what Tengen ends up doing is just completely dispelling the barrier, the empty barrier, that is, and thusly, I guess that's an interesting way to do it, though, because I suppose if I had to guess what Kenjaku did, Kenjaku expanded his domain and gave the guaranteed hit a range of the barrier that they were in, so Yuki couldn't run anywhere inside the barrier without getting hit. So in order to dispel this at a much faster rate than simply eating away at the guaranteed range of the hit effect by attaching a barrier to it and removing the attachment, what Tengen decided to do was just get rid of the barrier itself, which sorts of like is a hard shock to the domain itself, I assume. Imagine if suddenly the world you had was either a whole lot smaller or a whole lot bigger. Anything inside of it would kind of give you like a perspective shock, and I'm assuming that's what happened to Kenjaku's domain, which caused it to cancel. And we see that Kenjaku stay mocking, because he's like, really, you dispelled my domain as well as the empty barrier? A stubborn old fool, aren't you, Tengen? Interesting. Though, of course, as Kenjaku lands in this new barrier, or seemingly, I'm assuming, the star plasma area, it's too late. We see in a puddle on the ground, Yuki lies there, covered in spaghetti sauce. And we see that apparently, according to Kenjaku, a fight with her own domain may not have led to such a poor conclusion. You shouldn't have relied on him, interestingly enough. I'm assuming Kenjaku may not know Tengen's gender, I guess. But Tengen has hidden something important from you. The culling games. Like, you couldn't... Garuda, you couldn't wait just a little bit. Like he was gonna drop a bomb on us. Well, that's bad, but he was gonna let us know something, Garuda. You could have just waited a little bit out of sight. However, I wonder what would have happened if Yuki opened her domain. Like, how does a barrierless domain happen or interact with a barrier domain? Like, once again, me personally, I still think the final fight in the series, or at least the second to final fight, is going to be Gojo versus Sukuna one way or another. I think that's too heavily foreshadowed and built up for it to not happen at this point. The King of Curses versus the peak of humanity, I think it has to happen. And we know Gojo, for all intents and purposes, has the strongest barrier domain, with a sure hit effect that literally just takes you out entirely. But at the same time, Sukuna has, assumingly, the mightiest unbarriered domain. Like, Kenjaku is obviously strong, but 20 Finger Sukuna strong? I'm not exactly sure about all that. So, with that being the case, I'm really wondering how those two would have interacted. Maybe that's why Kenjaku's talking about that. Because maybe the sure hit effect of Yuki's barrier, with the whole infinite mass thing, would have overridden Kenjaku's effect. We'll never know. It's too late. And it appears that it's entirely possible that Tengen knew that that could be the case, but specifically led Yuki down this worse path because he may have wanted something else. Tengen may have ulterior motives, hidden something important from them, like Kenjaku went on to say. And what that important thing could be, I don't know. It seems like the true purpose of the Culling games may be something a lot deeper and darker that has been set up alongside Tengen for these past 1,000 years. And they've just been playing a long game, putting up an act. However, before Kenjaku can reveal anything Omega, crazy, insane, interesting, of course, the Shikigami has not disappeared. And we see Garuda simply vibing there. Goes a little... And Kenjaku's like, wait a second. If the Shikigami isn't here, that means... And he turns and Yuki has risen. And notably, once again, since he just activated his domain, his technique is out of the question right now. Arguably, 2 of them, maybe 3 of them if he still has idle. I doubt it just based on the thing that was mentioned last chapter. But it's interesting. I mean, I guess because his brain is in there. But that body hopping technique did not get canceled. So he's entirely good. But with that being the case, Garuda lunges in and tries to get him. But Kenjaku dodges. And she's like, wait a minute. Huh? Who? What? Why? Where? What? She's still conscious? She can barely move, but she might be able to use reverse curse technique. Her Shikigami is buying her time to heal. Fine, I'll replenish my curse techniques. Plural. Numerous. However, assumingly, I guess I would have to take a guess that being a special grade kind of means you have to have reverse curse technique. I mean, Gojo was always a special grade, and so was Yuta. But still, of her level and experience, I'm assuming she would have some sort of RCT. But with that being the case, we see that Kenjaku is expecting Yuki to operate in a conventional and logical manner. But he did not realize who he was ending up fighting. Because Yuki comes out the clutch with the kick to the head ready. Like, I'm assuming if Kenjaku didn't block that, that kick would have deliberately taken his head off. However, we do get to see that due to the damage she's taken, her curse technique is, well, not deplenished or gone like Kenjaku's is currently. Her force is a whole lot lower. Because this kick should have, if Garuda was any implication, or no, if the punch from last chapter is any indication, should have literally broken Kenjaku's arms and knocked his head off. But no, Kenjaku's perfectly able to block a kick directly from Yuki. And we see that Kenjaku's like, ugh, you disgusting individual. You look ugly. Why won't you heal yourself? And Yuki, with the biggest grin on her face, is like, I don't wanna. And proceeds to exchange a whole barrage of blows. However, once again, I guess maybe, like, why... I wonder how much weaker her curse technique has gotten. Because, once again, they're exchanging blows that, once again, should be breaking all of Kenjaku's arms. Like, bro should not have arms after this. The fact that they're still intact, wild. Wild indeed. However, with that being the case, we do get to see that Garuda comes in the clutch as Yuki's trying to swanging, and locks Kenjaku in a hold. However, Kenjaku's arms are still free. He managed to keep his arms out to block Yuki's kick as Garuda ends up essentially entangling his torso. However, due to all the damage she took from the domain, seemingly even internal damage, while this is weird. While Kenjaku is held up in Garuda, Yuki finally feels the effects of it and blah, 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 rainbows all over the floor. And we see that Kenjaku's like, oh, well, you're at your limit. And he says, you must have thought. you thought, that's essentially what Kenjaku says. You thought you surprised me, but this isn't a better way of doing this? Have you forgotten? Oh, but no. At this point, with Kenjaku believing his victory is pretty much assured, because Yuki's kind of blah, 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 rainbows everywhere, he's like, come on now. You are much better than this, or at least I thought you were. But maybe you are just inferior to me. But we see that Yuki's like, oh, have you forgotten? I like the rough type. And through the clutch, through another barrier McDaria, guess who shows up? Guess who pops in? It's Big Daddy Choso. Big bro. You know. He flow. Come on now. You know what's gonna happen. You know what's gonna pop off. He got the supernova / Pearson blood on deck. You know he's about to shoot his father in the neck. He's about to get it. And he's about to wreck. Like, come on now. you can know that Choso is gonna do absolutely not. Like this is one of the weird cases where like my brain is just like, it's not ending here. Like for some reason in my heart of hearts I know, yeah, Yuki and Choso are just not gonna beat kenjaku. Like that's just not how it's going to work here. So obviously this is somehow going to fail, but it is a very hype end to a very hype chapter. Overall, I really like the chapter. It continues the fight between Yuki and kenjaku, obviously, but it shows the level and prowess that kenjaku's at to an even higher degree. Like the second person in the entire series to have a barrierless domain, and that is very crazy. Once again, we get more and more hints that tengen is not what they seem, and everything we learn about tengen makes me think they're even more sussy than the last thing I learned about tengen. So I love learning more about that. I love seeing kenjaku just reveling in it, being kenjaku, living it up in the city. Ooh, ooh, ooh. But like, I love seeing that, and obviously seeing Yuki just fully give in to like the manic. And to be fair, I'm assuming she taught Todo. Like this side, well, no, she did teach Todo, but this side of the mentality that I don't care what limbs I lose, I don't care how much damage I'm in, as long as I can still fight, I will. I think she definitely implanted that madness in him with how she grins in the face of despair. And when asked why she doesn't heal herself, she just says, I don't wanna. I love that. These characters, so good, so well established in such a short period of time. So interesting to see them fight, interact, and grow. I guess not grow necessarily, but establish themselves. Really, really good. However, that's what I think. Please tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure that notification bell so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do a page down below. It's more for as low as $1 month. Exclusive videos, early content, and more. Or you can become a member of the channel and get those perks and even more. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.